Hello, and welcome to Just Another Real Estate Podcast, where we'll speak with Arizona's most successful real estate professionals to better understand their business, current market conditions, team and business building strategies, successes, and challenges. This podcast is brought to you by Dwell Inspect Arizona with your host, Sean Garvey.
Let's do it. Today on Just Another Real Estate Podcast, I have a good friend of ours, Dan Weisinger with Weisinger Residential. Thank you for being a part of this, Dan. We certainly appreciate having you on today. Tell me, you are obviously a realtor. Tell me your path to real estate. What's your story?
Sure. Well, Sean, thanks again for having me on. I'm excited to do this. I've been meaning to do this for a long time. So thanks for having me on as your first guest. No, but my path into real estate, I feel like, unless you come from a traditional family of realtors and you just kind of naturally went that way, it makes sense. I did not grow up in an entrepreneurial family. Mom is a retired, she was a teacher and also worked for the school district. My dad was a commercial loan officer for a little over 30 something years. So I grew up in a great family, but just didn't have that sort of entrepreneurial background. So I worked in the restaurant industry for about 12 and a half years, doing everything from bartending to managing, and most recently with box restaurants. And I'd always wanted to get into real estate, but there was a lot of fear driving that decision to make that leap to go from, hey, I have a good salary-based job, 401k, health benefits, to say, hey, you know what? I'm going to throw that all away, all that cushiness, and then just no guarantees, and let's see what happens. But I think in anything in life, it's so important to do something that's really fulfilling. And while I still loved the relationships I built in the restaurant industry, it just wasn't something that I wasn't fulfilled. So one of the best decisions I ever made. But I had just recently got married, and I tell my wife, hey, you know what? I think I'm about becoming a realtor, and I'm not going to have any income. What do you say? And she was totally on board. My wife is an entrepreneur, and she's an entrepreneur at heart. So she's always been, and she's really kind of been pushing me to get in that space. So I put in my 2 weeks, so really kind of more like 90 days. I have a close relationship with my previous employer, and I did the 9-day crash course in real estate school and just kind of hit the ground running and jumped right into real estate. And it's been an absolute blessing for my family. I love it. Absolutely. Yeah.
So funny. Our path is similar. When I got into home inspections, I was doing some project management for a fix and flip, but in order to start my business, I supplemented as a bartender as well. So I would do inspections, marketing activities, business building, learning about the craft. And then at night I was supplementing my family with home with bartending. So at some point I came out of the restaurant trades too, which I think, to me personally, I think everybody should work in a restaurant at some point in their life, because it teaches you so many valuable lessons about pressure and communications and human contact. But I think it helps a lot getting into business too, because it can kind of set you apart, because you can build a relationship really, really fast.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And to be able to do both, that must have been so challenging for you as well to do the inspection part and then go to bartending while also raising a family. I'm sure that had its own challenges as well. But absolutely, it just when I worked in the restaurant industry, you're between these four walls, especially in management. Sometimes 10, 14 hours a day. So it's imperative that you, even if you're this person adjacent to you isn't your favorite person, as I'm getting text messages here, but it's imperative that you create some sort of cohesive work environment with that person and learn. You really have you have to put your ego aside. And I think that's the most important part of real estate as well, is listen, in order for us to accomplish our goal here, whether it be the restaurant or in real estate, I have to remove myself, no matter what my opinion on this person, either it's a high opinion or low or wherever, it's so important to put that aside in order to accomplish whatever your specific goal is. And it's the same thing for real estate. It's in the very beginning, and that was a big lesson for me as well. A lot of that, I felt like an emotional teenager in the first year in real estate, because a lot of it is you're just soaking up so much information, and it's just flying at you from all directions, and you're trying your best to create good systems and good practices while also surround yourself by the quote unquote right people, so you can learn as quickly as possible, and you're also trying to earn income. And so when you're going through all that process and wanting to make sure you're protecting yourself and your family, and then also want to earn some money, earn a living, I remember the first year in real estate, I told my wife, I was like, I was emotional wreck that first year, because there's responsibility of, like, I've got a mortgage and I've got a marriage and I've got responsibilities, and I might not make income for 6 months, which I'm just not used to. So being able to manage your own expectations while also, again, putting your ego aside to know that this is for the greater good, that was a huge lesson in that first year in real estate.
That's amazing. And so did you supplement? Were you working in the restaurant and then started?
No, I didn't.
License? You burned the ship and you said, this is it.
Yeah, I jumped right in. For me personally, it doesn't work for everybody.
Right.
I'm married. We don't have any kids. So not a lot of responsibility when it comes to that. I think had we had children, at the time, that would have been a different story. I know a lot of people who had to bartend or serve or whatever other job they were in at the time, to supplement that before they got into real estate, just because, or when they were doing real estate, just to be able to take care of whatever the responsibilities were. I didn't have that. So when I knew I was going to make that leap, so I had saved I think I had about 8 to 10 months of runway for mortgage payments, car payments, and whatever responsibilities that we had. So we still had that cushion. If all else failed, I could go back in the industry, but I really didn't want to put the one toe in the water. I wanted to just go dive in and fully immerse myself into it. That worked for me, but I know that doesn't work for everybody based on their own circumstances.
I think it's the right way to go. I mean, I can imagine, month 6, when your account's starting to dwindle and you don't want to make phone calls to prospect for new clients, it makes it pretty easy to pick up that phone and call. I mean, I'm a huge advocate of burning the ship and having, even if it's just a psychological, no second chance, it allows you to focus and really dig in on key activities to generate revenue and business, because it's that pesky revenue side that makes business hard, right? Like,
and that pesky revenue.
It's the whole reason for that. What are the first year I've become a realtor, I find pretty fascinating, because you did cut off everything. You cut off everything that you knew. You decided to stop going into your place of environment or your work.
Yeah.
And you said, this is what I am now, and this is what I'm going to do. And you trust me, trust me. What are some resources that you used to kind of help develop your authority and make sure that you were making the right decisions?
Sure. So for me personally, I think the most important thing was before I even started the process of interviewing brokerages, I reached out to friends of mine who were successful in that field already.
Yeah.
So I had a handful of friends who were realtors in the Valley, and I asked, what are some steps that I should take to go forward? And I'm sure YouTube is a great resource as well to how to start to get real estate. But I think leaning on your sphere is so important. You get more of that sort of direct sort of knowledge from that person to know what to do, whereas YouTube tends to be more of a kind of a general idea. So I reached out to some friends. They advised me to interview, several brokerages to see what they offered, what they didn't offer, what was the best fit for me. But the absolute best thing that I could do as a new agent is I joined a team. So I think there's some motivation, when you're like, all right, I'm going to work on my own. I'll be a solo agent. I think doing that from the get-go is a huge mistake. And that's just my opinion personally. I think it's so imperative to join a team, a successful team that not only fosters, innovation and training and education, but has a consistent platform to teach you, how to be a successful realtor. So I joined another group that was about, I think there was about 30 to 35 agents on the specific team. So a pretty good sized team that was based in Tempe originally. And I don't even work necessarily in Tempe, but I just connected with these guys, and they had a weekly training program. The brokerage itself had a great training program, and when you have an ecosystem that large, there tends to be 3 to 4 or 5 people who are going to be the cream of the crop, if you will, of agents who are succeeding. So naturally, I really gravitated towards those other agents, and I was just like, how are you doing what you're doing? Like, how are you succeeding? What are some of the pitfalls? What would you do differently, knowing what you know now in your first year of real estate? So really being a part of a team, and just having so many things fired your way gives you more of an opportunity. You grow up so much faster versus being solo and just kind of, having to figure out on your own, and then versus talking to somebody who's been through it for 5 or 10 or 15 years, and just be like, who has navigated so many different market cycles and how to have tough conversations with clients. And I learned a lot of that from the first 6 months of real estate.
Interesting. Actually didn't know that path of your career. So thank you for sharing that. What,
Absolutely.
how'd you find a team that you wanted to be part of? I mean, you just, is that you enlisted with your brokerage? I mean, this is me being totally green. I don't know. You enlisted with your brokerage and you said, hey, I want to join a team. And they're like, here's 7 options. Or did you answer an ad on Craigslist or?
Sure. It was actually the Craigslist where it's like, what's that called? They pass you by.
Yeah.
Or what's it called? Like you were wearing a green suit.
No. Missed opportunities or something like
missed
that.
Opportunity. No, so so like I said, I reached out to some realtor buddies of mine to see some lending people in the lending atmosphere, and I'm like, what are you part of a team? Who do you work with? Who do you like? So I reached out to my sphere, and I got several different names, and either was directly with the designated broker that I had conversation with, or was with a team lead who was a part of the brokerage. And so I went and talked to a couple of guys who were the team leads on this specific team at a different brokerage, and we just went out to lunch and got to know each other and our backgrounds, and then obviously dove into what kind of splits do you have, what kind of training is there, and a lot of it just came down to like, who do I want to spend time with? Like there might have been another brokerage that I would have succeeded just the same, but I also knew like my ambition and my values lined up with this particular group, and so that's what made me choose this group. Ultimately, I wanted to be with my current brokerage, but as a new agent, they didn't accept new brokerages, and so you had to have a few sales under your belt, which I think is fantastic. But this was the biggest platform for me to get started into real estate.
And was you did mention splits. Was money a big factor in it, or did you just know that this was kind of a temporary landing? I'm going to get here, I'm going to learn, I'm going to make some money, and I'm going to give up some money just for that education. Or
it's a great question. Hindsight always 2020. I think had I done it differently, I think I would have focused less on the split, because I think a lot of my focus originally, again, coming from my background where it's like I make a consistent paycheck and I know what I'm doing every single day. I think there's a lot of apprehension and nervousness on my own part to be like, I want the splits to be better, to make more money up front. If I'm a newer agent, and if I'm talking to myself like 4.5 years ago, I would say, don't worry about the money. The money will come. The training and the education is so much more valuable and will create the roadmap to where you want to get to. I was very, very focused on the money up front. And I think that kind of blinded me to what the bigger goal was. Like I said, was just to be a trusted resource, to be a good realtor, to be a specialist in my area, to give my clients the best advice possible. When you're a brand new agent, you're like, I want to make $1 million, like those guys on, LA, $1 list or whatever it is.
Yeah.
It looks so easy. It's like, why are you giving me, 50-50 split? That's garbage. But, if they have the resources to make you successful, because that's the whole point. I feel like either you want to be part of a team or you want to create a team. It's one of two ways. And there's no wrong way. If you feel like, I like the team environment, I want to be a part of the team and not be the team lead, that's completely okay. It just depends on your personality and where your comfort lies. For me, for my personality, I knew that I wanted to be a team lead. And so I think that in the beginning, I kind of butt heads with the team leads of my first brokerage because I was more focused on the money and the splits than I was on really diving into more of the training and the education. And I think that if I'm a new agent, I would focus more on that, just the education part of it.
Do you have an ant on the screen?
I had these pesky notifications.
No worries.
We do have gnats in the office, though. So we're called a gnat. There was one in my coffee, but I don't care. So it's
fine. How'd you know when it was time? I mean, you said you butted heads, but like when it was time to make that shift, because I watch. Obviously, we work really closely with agents, and I watch them move around from time to time, or some of them move around pretty frequently, and both on teams and in brokerages, and separate it. And is it like a breakup? Is that a hard conversation? Like you have to go up to your team and say, "Hey, I'm moving on," or tell me about that experience.
Well, I think it depends on the dynamic, but I kind of knew that I wanted to be with my current brokerage, and I say current brokerage like we're not allowed to talk about it, but I don't know, it doesn't matter.
You can, I don't
care. And it's not to disparage anyone else, but it's just for the time being. But so I think it's always a tough conversation.
Sure.
It feels a little bit like a breakup, but it's not personal, it's just business.
Cliches make it so much softer and make you feel better, huh?
It's not an easy conversation, because I think anytime that a team lead invests in a new agent, there's time and energy and a financial investment that you put into somebody that you hope will stay with you, whatever that life cycle looks like for a new agent on a team. I think there's a lot of probably frustration and disappointment from the team lead's perspective if you stay for a short time and go somewhere else.
Sure.
Certainly not my intention, but I knew that ultimately my biggest goal was to be I wanted to be part of a brokerage that didn't just take on everybody. Just like, your life is just come on in. We don't care. That's what I loved about my brokerage is that, they have incredible training. They have the right people. It's, no one has their hand over the cookie jar and says, you can't have this. It's literally, here's my entire playbook. Now it's your responsibility to do this. Don't take everything, but execute, make it your own, that kind of thing. And so that was what was pretty incredible. But having those conversations with a team lead and say, hey, listen, thank you for everything, but I've decided to transfer over. I feel like a little bit, it's like the restaurant industry in that sense, that there's just so much turnover that it's pretty common. I don't know. I think that, even in my current place, I had thought about going somewhere else as well. And a lot of that was motivated by market conditions. And so, when COVID hit, business for a little bit slowed down, and it was pretty scary, and scary for a lot of different reasons. But being at home and you're just kind of alone in your thoughts. You're like, am I with the right place? Is this the right thing?
Sure.
We're all living on Zoom calls. I'm getting Zoom fatigue. Like, do I keep this? So I had played around with the idea of going somewhere else, but ultimately, I had some pretty heavy conversations with the owner of the brokerage, and it just came down to like, it's pretty common for agents to blame the brokerage whenever there's any kind of market shift or market change. They're like, it's the brokerage, I'm not getting what I need out of this. And really, you have to look at the mirror and say, all right, well, what you did previously doesn't necessarily work with what you're doing currently. And so you have to, change your approach, change your marketing, get more creative, because everything I'm getting, and the reason I've been successful is because of people I work with. And I think changing that, there's pros and cons to everything, but I just love the group that I work with, and my business has continued to thrive. I'm like, let's just keep this going.
Keep it going. But that's interesting that you say that, because you're not part of a group anymore. You're not part of a team. You are your team, and yet you still have a broader picture of people that you work with. So you're still surrounding yourself with successful people, but at a different or higher level. So we're kind of experiencing a little bit of a shift now, clearly, and we've had several of these conversations over the years. And I remember vividly when the COVID hit and you and I talked, and they made us essential, which was kind of a blessing for both of us, right?
Yeah.
Because we're able to continue on and adapt and figure out ways to do it. But what are your shifts for this current market conditions, and how are you helping your clients win and advising them to win?
Sure. So what I love about our current market, and there's a lot of uncertainty and fear and panic. There's a narrative going around, obviously, it's the crash and all this kind of stuff. And
sure.
The challenging part of navigating this current market is altering the perception, because a lot of the media, what gets clicks is crash or recession and that kind of stuff. And recession doesn't mean necessarily that your home price or values are going down. There's been a lot of information where it's like 3 of the past 5 recessions, home values have actually gone up. I think it was like the 90s or whatever it was, where like there was a recession and went down like less than 2% in value nationally. Then of course everyone remembers the big crash in 08, 9, and 10. But that's an outlier. So when you look at the grander schemes, as far as like, what lending practices are like right now, it's having those conversations with your client and really being an educator and allowing them to make that decision. So has the market slowed down a little bit? Sure. But it's only slowed down in the sense of we were at a lightning pace for basically like a year and a half to 2 years, which was shocking when you consider that we're also going through a pandemic. It's just not only that, but like I didn't have time to do, as a solo agent, there wasn't a lot of time to do, a ton of social media. There wasn't a lot of time to do a ton of marketing, a ton of outsourcing or interviewing other agents to grow my team. It was just like, hurry up and go. Your pants are on fire. You have to get your clients into the house. And you didn't feel like you were adding, it was tough, when you're telling your clients, hey, my value add to you is you have to write $50,000 over ask and waive everything to get this house. But that's what it was. It was, you had to throw everything out the window and then sacrifice a small goat in order to get this house. Where now, with interest rates going up and then a little uncertainty in the market, it's been great for realtors who have been doing this for a while, who know how to have the right conversations, who get to educate their clients, who now get to, believe it or not, we get, if I'm showing my client a house, we get to have a second look sometimes. If it's like, hey, we're going to look at 10 homes, maybe of those 10 homes, we like 2 of them. Let's go take a look at those homes again. We didn't get that opportunity last time. So now, instead of you've got 10 minutes to see this house and write an offer, now you have time to think about it, sit back, and then really put together a strategy as far as like, all right, yes, rates are high. You can do a rate buy down. A lot of lenders are really creative right now where you can do what's called a 3-2-1, whereas essentially you pay, or you have a negotiation with the seller. If they're willing to, instead of reducing the price, let's say, by $15,000, the price is the same, but 15 in concession goes towards the interest rate. So you buy it down.
Oh, interesting.
You have a lower payment. So it's like 3% lower the first year, 2% lower, 1% lower. And then after 3 years, then you can figure out whether or not, where rates are at. Either you do a refi or what have you to kind of keep that rate lower. So there's a lot of different creative avenues that we're able to educate our clients on that we really didn't have the luxury that we have today. And then plus with more listings, we're starting to get more of a balanced market. So we're starting to
Right.
get sort of almost equal negotiation on both sides, where it's like, hey, yeah, your neighbor's a home sold for 50,000 over ask 3 months ago. That's not the same market anymore.
Yeah.
So it's kind of
Interesting.
coming back down to reality of, now we have to price it really fair market value. We have negotiation on price and terms, and it's like a normal market. So
Yeah.
it's I understand the some of the apprehension from some of my clients who are like, I don't know what's going on.
Sure.
And it's not my job to push them to be like to make that decision. It's my job to here's the data, here's the information, you make of it what you will, and then if you want to buy a house, you can buy a house.
Makes sense to me. I mean,
Yeah,
it almost seems like the realtor's position has, or value proposition and position has changed dramatically and immensely. I mean,
yeah,
the last 2.5 years, not only have values or prices increased, I don't know, 80 to 150%.
yeah.
But you were in a frenzied place, and I don't know how many offers you probably wrote in that time period. It had to be thousands, hundreds.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, there was clients in all between like 400,000 and 1.5, and
Sure.
of course the ones at 400,000. There were clients. We had to set expectations right away. Before we show houses, we'd sit down and we'd have a buyer consultation for at least an hour, sometimes 2 hours, depending on their experience. If they were a first-time home buyer, if they purchased multiple homes. And I would have to educate my clients like, hey, listen, this is the market that we're in. You're going to have to fall in love with maybe 10, 15, could be 20 homes, which is a really, it's a tough conversation to have with your client, because after a while, clients can feel like your value, isn't as high as they thought it was. Like, well, you're
Mm,
such a great agent. Why am I not getting these houses? And it just depends on the qualifications of the client. They may be a financed offer. They may not be able to afford to waive the appraisal, or to go significantly over ask. And so there were tough conversations that we had a couple of years ago where it's like you might have to sit out for a couple of years until this market cools down
wow.
to be able to write a competitive offer, because there were situations where we might write 10 offers and we're not changing the terms enough to really push the needle, and it's like we're just not getting where we need to be, to no fault of the client. It's just they have to stay within a specific affordability range, and if they couldn't do it, then it's like, hey, maybe sit this out, save some more money, and then wait, for the market to change a little bit, which it has. Interest rates have obviously gone up quite a bit, but it's less competitive. So, it's the value add. I feel like of a realtor is just to present the data and allow the clients to make a decision. I feel like
Sure.
a lot of times, like we get labeled as salespeople, and it's slimy or whatever. People who have that slimy moniker, they just don't last in this business or most businesses, probably.
Yeah, of course.
If you want to be a successful agent, it is like, if I'm going the right way here. So this is how you start. It's like, this is kind of like your line right here of growth. It's like just incrementally, you just grow, but based on reputation and sales and new clients and reputation.
Keeps
Whereas
going.
like, if you're trying to go like this, it just doesn't work that way.
Can't handle it.
No, no.
That line was perfect, by the way.
What was that? I was
Hey,
like,
you nailed
it's
it.
like it's like the DVD back in the day that was like, is it going to touch the quarter?
um, I think that's interesting, and you bring up, you brought up Zoom fatigue. Imagine just this is people's homes that we're trying to buy, and they might fall in love with 20 homes. It's really not possible. Um,
Yeah,
I mean, I'm a firm believer that you end up in the house that you're supposed to end up on, and sometimes the first house you choose is not the right one. As you and I have worked with people before, where they'll get through the inspection and it's just too much for them to take on, or they've fallen out of love with the house on that. Not simply because of the inspection, but maybe because they've spent more time in the house during the inspection than they did to choose to buy on it, or when they made the buying decision. Um, so sometimes it takes 1, 2, 3, 4 houses. I think our record with somebody inspecting houses is 4, and I'm in on that record too. It did take me 4 houses to find the right one. Um, and so I can't
Oh,
imagine.
it took you personally 4 houses. Is that what you said?
Yeah,
Wow. Okay.
we had 4 houses under contract, and the 4th one was the right house where we were supposed to be. So for various reasons, moving family from Hawaii, not being in state, stuff kept coming up. We couldn't get a feel for the house, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
So it took a while, and there was a little bit more work on the back end, but we ended up where we were supposed to be. Which segues into how do you build successful client relationships? Because it's being a real estate agent is a people business. It's a service-based business.
It is. Yeah. It's a great question. So, it's a slow burn. I think it's important in the beginning when you're a new realtor. You want to work with everybody. You want to get that experience, and so you talk to so many different people and different avenues. But the longer you're in this business, and if you continue to stay successful and continue to follow up and you're consistent in your communication and your delivery and your service, it tends to happen naturally. So you tend to, my first year in real estate, I did 10 transactions.
Wow, it's huge.
I don't know what the average is. Yeah, it was. I know that I think it was a new agent. The average to close their first transaction was somewhere between 6 and 9 months.
Yeah.
And I was able to do, I think it was 6 transactions in my first 6 months. And then I had transferred over about after 7 or 8 months. Thank you. To the new brokerage, and then I had some in the pipeline already to close out. But anyway, when you're with these people who are buying houses or selling houses, you kind of organically become a part of their lives. You're like, because there's going to be periods in the transaction where, all right, we had the inspection, we negotiated whatever repairs. There's title has a responsibility. And so during that time, you're just kind of following up naturally with clients. How you guys doing? I'm still here. You guys need anything? Do you want to go get some coffee? And so you organically learn about, where they came from and their family and their background and, why they're buying a house. And so you develop this relationship with your clients, and some of them I become lifelong friends with some of my clients, which is, that wasn't the intention. I don't go out like, I'm going to be your best friend because I have so many best friends. But you sometimes just naturally click with people, and it's once you do that, then there's that trust and there's credibility, and they tend to be like, hey, I've got a friend or a coworker or a colleague or whatever that needs to buy or sell, and you start to develop that relationship. So really just pick up the phone and call them and just think. 90% of the conversations I have with clients has nothing to do with real estate. It really, it's just being a human being. And it's like, hey, how are you doing? I saw on Facebook, you guys were at Disneyland. How was Disneyland? What's going on in your life? How's work? What else is going on? That kind of thing. And then if they decide to talk about real estate, that's great. If not, I just want to know how my clients are doing. And I think if you approach it from a real authentic and genuine space, that your clients sense that. They're like, oh, he's calling me because he really cares about, my family, which is true. Not because he's just trying to get more sales. If you're just focused on sales and money, it's there's an expression I heard called commission breath. And it's like, if you approach it that way, people can smell that, just like my coffee breath. On you from a mile away. Yeah.
Are you fairly regimented in reaching out and continuing the conversations or the relationship? I mean, obviously the ones that you're lifelong friends with, and I don't mean to do air quotes on that, but that have evolved into lifelong friends. Um, those are the easy ones to call. But there are
Yeah.
some that you have client relationships. Like it is a business transaction and client relationships that maybe
Yeah.
hasn't developed into that lifetime. The easy ones are going to be the friends to pick up the phone and call? Are you still calling everybody in there, and how regimented are you?
I am. So I have it's called 555s. I'm sure there's a lot of people who have different terms for it, but
Yeah.
it's 5 days a week. And that's just a coincidence. That's 5 days a week, but it's either five current, past, or people I met. I'm going to call. So maybe a past client I call, a current client, or someone I met, at a coffee shop or something.
Hmm.
Then I do five handwritten cards. And that could be anything from like happy birthday, happy anniversary, happy homeversary. It's a kid's birthday. They just got a dog. Congratulations. Wherever.
Yeah.
And then I'll do five comments on social media. So if I'm on social
Okay.
media, I'll see like, someone just had a baby. Congratulations, that kind of thing. And it's a great way to organically stay in touch with your sphere or your clients. I love the handwritten card. It's kind of like the oh man, I forget his name. The Ruffini. It's the
Buffini.
Ruffini
Yeah.
approach.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like sort of amalgamation of that. But I love doing the handwritten cards. Whenever you get a handwritten card, it just stands out in a crowd.
Yeah.
When you have all this junk mail and you see someone that just wrote the card, you're like, huh. I think it makes a good impression. I love getting them. I still get them from my mom,
Really?
in my family, and it's just there's an emotional response to it. I think that just says, "Hey, I took the time to not just send you a message on Instagram or whatever, but I wrote down a handwritten something to celebrate something about you."
Hmm.
And it doesn't take a whole lot. It's just like five cards a day. That takes me maybe 25 minutes, if that, stamps and put them in the mail. And then five comments and then five phone calls. And of the five phone calls every day, maybe depending on what time I call, maybe two pick up, and
Yeah.
I'll leave messages for the other people. So, and a lot of times you won't even get a call back. It's just, they think that, sometimes clients will think, oh, they're just trying to get like a sale or whatever it is. And I'm like, that's okay. It's,
Yeah.
that might be a client that you don't have as close a relationship with or potential client. But when you show up every single day and you're consistent, it, people notice that. They're like, oh, he's always sending cards out. He's always calling. And, it seems to be from a genuine space. So that's someone I'd like to work with. So that has worked for me personally. I know there's a lot of people who have different approaches and that works. But I think it's just that, like I said, it's that slow build up that,
Sure.
eventually gets you to a space where you want to be.
No, I mean that's really powerful. There's always going to be different approaches, and that's one good thing about business is that you could try a bunch of different things, and you start to find what the longer that you're in it, you start to find out what really starts to work. Um, so one of I think the most compelling platforms is social media, and I think you're really good on social media too. It helps that you have a wife that's really great on social media.
Know what you're talking about.
um, to support you in that. And what are some strategies and what's your kind of play in the social media realm for a real estate
Sure.
agent, but also building your own brand?
Um, well, the scary social media is so powerful. It's so
Yeah.
powerful, and it can be incredibly time consuming, but also incredibly rewarding.
Mm.
My experience with social media, like I primarily use Facebook and Instagram.
Right.
I haven't dove too much into TikTok. I've used it a little bit, but I know it's something I'll have to implement as well. And then, of course, I do some YouTube videos on educational platforms. But um, when I look back, I still have my first video that I did for an open house when I was a brand new realtor. And if you watch it now, it's almost like ASMR, where it's like if you watch this, it'll put you to sleep. Like it's like, hi, I'm Dan Weisinger. It's my house. and you're like, gosh, I was like, that's so boring. And it's okay. It's okay to be terrible. I think with some newer agents who, maybe not so much with newer agents. It depends on where you're at in life, but if you're already accustomed to using social media and you're not afraid of it, and you embrace technology, then it's no big deal. But if it wasn't something that you use aside from like me when I was in the restaurant industry, I didn't use it so much to promote the restaurant because we had other people who were responsible for that. But it was just like, hey, this is what I'm doing this weekend. What are you guys doing? It was very kind of arbitrary. But in real estate, it's not only imperative to have a social media strategy of some kind as a part of your business, but it's free. It is you're top of mind. So anytime you create something and it goes out to whatever audience and however the algorithm works, I think it's like 10%. So if you had 2,000 followers, maybe 200 people will see that. But that means you're making 200 free impressions just by being like, "What's up, Dan Weisinger? I'm at a new coffee shop in Scottsdale, whatever." I like, for my strategy, I don't like it to be all real estate because I want it to be something like, "Oh, I know this guy." Whereas if you just give too much real estate, like open house, after a while, if you're like, "I'm done. Like, I'm going to tune this guy out. I get it. You're going to open house." Like, and there needs to be some sort of like a variation involved. So it's like a lot of times, I have my wife Shayna in a picture and we're on vacation, or it's a walkthrough for a house. But you're constantly figuring out ways to make a good impression, make interesting content, which is so imperative. It's not just like, don't just take anything like, "Oh, I had to post something, so I'll just put some real quick together and just post it just to put it out there." Because it's like, if you don't put any effort into it, you're not going to get much in return. So it's having a good social media strategy is like having another full-time job in and of itself. And I'm sure you can attest to that. Like, you do a great job with your social media, but I'm sure there's times where you're just like, your pants are on fire and you're doing multiple inspections. You're like, "Oh, that was a great opportunity to post this, but it's 160 degrees and it's attic and I just want to get out of here."
Yeah, for sure.
So it's one of those things where it's whatever you use, whether it's Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, it's really important to create like a specific, like, all right, here's a top 5 mistakes sellers make, or here's a top 5 things to do before you sell your house, or here's top 5 things buyers should do before they look at properties. Like, everyone loves top 5s. It's just it's really an attention grabbing thing. Yeah. And maybe doing like 3 to 5 posts a week is somewhere, and I'm guilty of it too. Like, I'm not doing that enough, but doing 3 to 5 posts a week, and supplement that with stories. Now Instagram has for a while Reels, because they're competing with TikTok. So the challenge with Reels is to make interesting content that isn't necessarily like I gotta dance to get views and I'm a realtor, and it's just like, it becomes a little ridiculous. You're like, "Hey, interest rates and selling your house." You're like, "Why is this guy dancing?" So it's challenging to be,
because he's good at it,
entertaining and fun and informative, and not being like a clown at the same time.
I mean, that totally makes sense. And one thing I wanted to ask you is like, outside of business, real estate stuff, what are some content that you think adds value from a business perspective? Like, "Hey, don't forget about me because I'm Dan, your realtor, man." You can have that one.
I actually have that on my phone when it's the hotspot. It says Dan, the realtor, man.
Oh, perfect. But keeps you top of mind, but keeps people engaged. Like, what are some stuff you do outside of the vacations and stuff like that? I mean, you're out touring people, and because a lot of your stuff is seemingly organic, maybe a little planned. Like, how do you get inspired in that and to create and bring value?
I think as a solo agent or a new agent, I think it's important to because it's like, you want to develop your own identity. which is important. But you also want to see who are others who are doing it very successfully. So like Ryan Serhant is somebody that I really follow, who just has a ton of energy, really engaging content, really different, unique stuff. A lot of the guys from those shows on Bravo, whatever network it is.
Sure.
It's like, all right, that's not necessarily realistic from like the reality TV perspective, but the content they're putting together, it's engaging. So a lot of it is, asking the right questions, like, hey, what are some things that you guys are looking for in a new build house? What are things that you guys like? Like, you want to create content that people want to engage with. Like, if I just put, hey, will you come to my open house from 9/11 on Saturday? No one cares. They're like, no, like, doesn't matter. But if you're like, hey, here's, there's a lot of people who bought houses in 2018, 19, and 20 who have a ton of equity, and deciding whether or not they want to sell their house and upgrade or pull out some equity and then put it back into their house for renovation. So, I'll create some content like, here's the top 5 areas to improve your house for the highest ROI. So it's like, the kitchen remodel. This is what your average kitchen remodel looks like, and bathroom, garage door, surprisingly, like the actual garage door, paint. If you just paint your house, typically it has like 110% ROI, and it's the cheapest thing you could do, as long as you maybe don't paint your house pink or purple or whatever, but paint the right color. It has some of the highest return on investment, and I think that's some of the content that I've gotten the most engagement with, where it's like, hey, here's the top 5 things you can do. And also, if you guys need a great contractor, DM me and I can send you a referral. And good. I built relationships through that way, where it's like, hey, I love your content, and I need a painter, I need a great home inspector, I need whatever. So you got to create a content that people want to engage with, that is fun. So, like I said, and it doesn't all have to be real estate focused. It could be like, I might visit a new restaurant in Scottsdale and like do a cool little reel where it's like different shots and food and fun and atmosphere. And then be like, what are your favorite restaurants in Scottsdale? Comment below. And, we could do a random gift card giveaway to the restaurant where it's like, hey, $25, to someone, like tag a friend and then write a comment. And then I'll randomly draw someone a gift card to this restaurant because I want to support a local restaurant.
And thank you for that. I have randomly won 6 times. I'm just kidding. Randomly. Do you think it's imperative though in business? I mean, social media at this point can you exist as a real estate agent without it?
Yeah, it depends on your client. Depends on who you're working with. I know a couple of very successful agents that are barely on social media, but they work with a lot of investors specifically. Investor clients, and not all of them, but a lot of investor clients aren't, big into social media. They're looking for the right deal. And so they want to meet the agent who could put that together. Yeah. And, where their time is, everyone's time is valuable, but especially for like an investor personality, type A personality, they're not wasting time scrolling on TikTok or Reels. Most investors aren't going to find you there. There might be some, but I think, there are agents who just, they'll do like an open house thing or whatever it is, but they've built up to that, if that makes sense. So it's like maybe they started as a newer agent, and then they thought, hey, I want to focus on, resale in this area. And then maybe naturally they started to gravitate towards investors. And, which I've worked with investors that, I've helped them buy 1 house or 6 houses and sell 2 to do a 1031 exchange. And so, they're not so concerned about social media, but, there certainly is an audience for that. So I think as a newer agent, unless you ever had that sphere built up where you're like, I come from a family, we're well off, and I worked with a lot of investors in previous doing fix and flips or wholesaling. So there isn't that much need for social media, but it definitely has benefited my business.
Of course.
And I think that, yeah.
Do you think it's more of an acquisition tool or a retention tool? I mean, I know it could be both, but how are you playing that game?
For me personally, it's more of a retention. Like I said, it's more of like I'm able to stay top of mind with my sphere.
Right.
If I happen to get a referral or somebody comes in and says, "Hey, I love your content," like I think maybe like 2 to 3 clients a year I've picked up through social media, doing something that I didn't know that wasn't a
That's
part
great.
of my immediate sphere,
Yeah.
which is great. And it wasn't the intention, because you have to know that, like, all right, in your immediate sphere, one person might know 10 agents, and so how do you separate yourself
Right.
from those 10 other real estate agents? And you're not trying to step on toes. I've talked to other real estate agents who are like, I don't do a lot of social media because I don't want to give away the farm. I don't want to give away my secrets, and I don't want other people stealing my stuff. And I get that, but I feel like there's enough. I come from like an abundant life, so it's like there's enough for everybody to go around.
Sure.
And I love to give away that information because, in my opinion, at least, I feel like if you are the person offering that information, then you're the expert. And if someone decides to steal that stuff and make it a copy or whatever it is, part of that is kind of flattering.
Yeah.
But also, like, they still have to execute. Like, I'm the one creating the content. I'm the one who is, constantly trying to grow and evolve and then put that into social media. And if some other agent takes that information and does what they want with it, that's fine. It's not going to ruin my day.
No.
But if it impacts my clients positively, that's the whole point of doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To be an authority.
Are you using TikTok?
We're just starting to a little bit. And I talked about this in my first podcast. My big eye-opening moment on TikTok was when we were interviewing VAs, and there were 5 of them based in the Philippines, 5 or 6 of them based in the Philippines, and we asked a pretty standard question, which was, when you have a question you don't know the answer to, what's your resource? And instead of saying YouTube or Google or whatever, they said TikTok. And and to me that was like a light bulb moment. Like, this is pretty important.
I think it was TikTok that they've now overtaken Google as the most visited site.
And one thing you mentioned for sure is there's so many different avenues. There's YouTube, there's TikTok, there's Facebook, Instagram. Didn't mention Snapchat and Twitter, and there's probably a couple others that I can't even remember. But that's a lot of work to get all 6 or 7 of those going. But I think it's important to manage it. We're 40 and 40-ish, let's say, and we didn't grow up with this, but the new batch of realtors that's coming on, that are just getting started, that are 20s and early 30s, they've had a camera stuck in their face their entire life. And I like your transparency that your first video you ever did was terrible. The first video I ever did was terrible, and all of them are still terrible, but you have to move out of your comfort zone to keep pushing into it to get better. And I think what I was driving at with is social media imperative for a real estate agent? I think that answer is starting to become yes. Those that, the 2 agents that work with investors that you can top of mind think of is becoming a smaller pool to move from.
Sure.
Why do you gravitate towards Facebook and Instagram at this point?
Well, now that you call us out as far as being in our 40-ish age,
that's okay.
No, but there's a comfortability there. With Facebook and Instagram, I'm used to it. So I've learned to kind of grow with it as that's grown. And TikTok is, I don't want to say the newest play. I mean, it's the newest player on the block, which really has a lot of the same functionality as Instagram Reels. So it's not, like I said, not that much different. There's a learning curve to it, of course. And I'm not opposed to implementing more TikTok into my strategy. But like you said, there's LinkedIn and Snapchat and whatever else is out there. I think it's important not to spread yourself too thin.
Oh, interesting.
It's important to have because in every, like, Facebook and Instagram, those are two different audiences. So it's really important that when you're creating content for Facebook, it tends to be an older audience, and it's important to if you're doing dance videos on Facebook specifically, you're probably not reaching the right people. Whereas like that tends to be more like on Facebook, like more data driven, more articles, things happening in a neighborhood specifically, or new commercial projects, things that are helping improve that, or whereas Instagram, again, tends to be more of the colorful, bright, kind of in your face, dance, fun, younger audience, and TikTok's an even younger audience, but similar. So it's important to have a strategy for each social platform, but it's also important not to spread yourself so thin that now you're spending so much time trying to create content for each one, where, like I said, that becomes a job in and of itself. Now, I'm not trying to dissuade anyone from doing that. Like, if you're like, hey, I do every single platform, and I make my calls, and I do open houses, like, and I have no time to see my family, or whatever it is. It's I certainly know that as I'm growing into my career, and as I begin to bring agents on and bring on an assistant, that'll be something that my assistant will help, or VA will help with, to implement strategy more for each specific social platform, because it's important. Again, it's another free avenue for you to advertise something, not advertise, but to post something on LinkedIn, to create a fun video on YouTube, to do a personal post on Instagram, and to do something different on Facebook. If you have a strategy for each one, or maybe say like 4 of the biggest ones out there, it can only benefit you long term. It's not like if you didn't do social media at all and all you did is open houses, I'm sure you do fine as a real estate agent. But once you start to add all these layers into your business, like either it's social media or handwritten cards and postcards and maybe some like neighborhood gathering, happy hour things, or whatever it is, or like I know some people who have done like a movie in the park, in a neighborhood, and they've gotten their title rep and lending partner to supplement that, and then get the community together to watch like a Pixar movie or something, just to have fun. When you start to layer all that in, it becomes a part of your DNA, your reputation as a realtor. It's someone's like not only a part of the community that is doing really cool things, but also you see them everywhere on every platform. So I don't know.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Yeah,
you got to do all that, and at some point you still have to open the doors, show houses, write contracts, negotiate deals, and make sure the transaction is seamless from the beginning to the end, to handing them the keys.
One thing that's helped is time management. If you step back and look at everything, it can be overwhelming,
for sure.
But if you structure your day accordingly, like, all right, I'm going to show 5 houses today, and then I'll stop off at a coffee shop, get a coffee, write the contract, or whatever it is. You can create content doing that as well. It's like, where you're like, all right, I have to write this contract in the coffee shop. Here's the life of a realtor. I'm writing an offer in this coffee shop because they have Wi-Fi. I'm dripping sweat in the summer, and you're like, you can still create fun content and be intentful at the same time, and then kind of show people kind of behind the scenes of what your life looks like. Because then you create realistic expectations, not only for newer agents,
Yeah.
But I think your clients have a better appreciation for the amount of work that goes into it, where it's not just like, hey, I just wrote an offer, I went home and I watched the Real Housewives or whatever. Not sure why that was the first choice.
That's okay.
No judgment. But that there's a lot more that goes into it, where it's not just like I wrote an offer and I got paid.
Right.
I think if you show the behind the scenes stuff of a lot of the grit and emotional roller coaster that you go on through the process, and then your clients go through as well, and you show that, people tend to like, hey, that's real. That's a real moment.
Yeah, for sure.
This person is working for their clients physically and emotionally. Yeah. So, yeah,
I think that's huge. I think I would love to see that story. Open up the doors and talk about the nitty gritty. As you're navigating through the process, and that way, you're learning something. I would imagine on every transaction. I still learn something at every inspection, at least.
Yeah.
Every time we're there, I learn one new thing. And so you take that and share it, you teach people, and then it grows your sphere and your impact on people.
Absolutely.
Let's switch into a quick inspector question. So
Sure.
As a buyer's agent, what do you like the most and what do you like the least about home inspections and inspectors? No feelings will be hurt in this.
What do I like the most? I mean, I think, when I first got into real estate, and again, I'm learning about the inspection process as well, because when I let me backtrack a bit. So I bought my first home. I actually bought my first home as a renter, and I bought it from the property manager. So I technically bought it as an unrepresented buyer,
Cool.
and didn't do any inspections, and so I didn't really know the process. And so when I was brand new to real estate, and I was working with other agents, and I would go to their inspections as well, you start to learn the process and the approach, and what they're looking at, what they can see, what they can't see. But it really wasn't until I don't mean this to make your ego any bigger than it already is, but it wasn't really until I worked with you that I really got to see like how thorough your team is, and how well you guys communicate, and the reports that you send out, and how you're there to be objectively, like you're just impartial. You're just, here's the details of the report. You're not sitting there going, you should buy his house, or you should run away. It's like you've done an incredible job training your team to be your voice. And I think that's really important. It's obviously every inspector will have their own personality.
Sure.
But really, even when you're not there, which breaks my heart when you're not there at every one of my inspections, I feel like you're there because I can tell just by the detail, things that they've gone over, what they have found, knowing some of the background, like when inspectors know some of the background of the client, like, oh, this is a first-time home buyer, or
right,
this is for a family. They, of course, they're still going through all the same, 8,000 steps they have to go through during inspection. Sure. But, I think knowing that, all right, this first-time home buyer, it's overwhelming. It's, you get in a 50-something page report. You're like, what am I getting myself into? It's very daunting. And not only do I educate my clients to, like, I send them one of your sample inspection reports so they know what to expect. Like, this is a good house, but, they're going to find something. And so your inspectors have done an incredible job of, really doing the hand holding, being available. If you have any questions, they can call them, because I'm by no means the expert. So if they ask me like, oh, what do you think this air conditioner with R22 refrigerant, it works fine, but here's someone you can talk to. You can talk to the inspector to get some more information, or you can talk to an expert. So I love that from our perspective. So your team has always done a great job of understanding, the client that they're working with, understand they have a job to thoroughly inspect the house up and down, and that, setting the expectation, like, listen, we're human. We're not going to see everything. We're not going to find everything every single time. There might be a little crack in the corner that it gets missed, or whatever it is. But there's always going to be a human element to it, and I appreciate that. And I know, like, clients have appreciated that. As far as what I don't like, I mean, it's, I don't like it that you guys find problems with houses. So no, it's hard to say. I love that, you are always looking for new ways to innovate and to deliver the information and make it easier for clients to read. Before it's just, it's a PDF of 54 pages, or now, you can find the links and break it down, and there's more information and guides, and where to go to get more information about this. I think you've made it incredibly user-proof to be able to, like, find this information, regardless of how experienced the client is in buying or selling homes. It's hard to, like, nitpick and say, well, I don't like it that. I don't know.
I understand.
Yeah.
Thank you. I was certainly blown away by that. That was not the intent of the question, but I appreciate it. Are you preparing? So as you're touring houses, you've been on a lot of inspections, you're paying attention. As you're touring houses, are you preparing your clients for things that might come up in the inspection? Or even if you walk through a house and maybe they start to like it and you're like, this is, I can see that there are XYZ already wrong with this house. Are you steering them in different directions? Or are you starting to coach them prior to offers being made? Given that we both know the last 2 years are crazy, but now we're entering into a more common market, where people have time to, have choices
to make a decision. Yeah. I think it's a balance. So because part of it is you don't want to interject your own potential opinion on a property.
Sure.
If it's glaringly obvious, like they're like, hey, there's termite tubes in the ceiling, so just be aware that, like, if there's termite tubes all over, there's a possibility that the previous owner neglected maintaining this property well. So just be aware of that. There shouldn't be any surprises there. They might still like the property, but I think when it comes to, like, aesthetics, there's just certain things. You walk into a property or location, you do your best to, like, put your client into an area that they're wanting to be in, and sometimes you structure that out. But if you're walking through a property, I'll certainly educate my clients on things to be aware of that are things that not everyone might think of. Like, I in older homes, I will look at the electrical panel.
Yeah.
And I will look at, like, all right, is this a modern panel? Does it have aluminum wiring? What does it cost to replace the panel? Things to be aware of in the house as well. I know you and I have done inspections, and you see these bootleg ground wires in the outlets, and if there's one, they're probably all like that. So you got to think of, like, all right, you might have to rewire this house. In the previous market, that probably wasn't something that we could negotiate. But in our current market, if we find a house that's crazy, I know 30 days on market, there might be an opportunity to have a reasonable conversation with the seller, and then negotiate, like, if it's a great house, except it has these things that you're probably going to have to take care of, there's a possibility that we might be able to get the seller to agree to repair this, offer credit, or whatever it is. I don't think you're doing your client any favors by just being completely in the background and silent and not saying anything.
Right.
You certainly want to sell the house. Like, they've got, a brand new roof and new windows, and they've got nice floors, but here it's like a compliment sandwich. You're like, here's some beautiful stuff. Here's the not so great
Yeah.
stuff, but here's the neighborhood as well. Like it's got a great school, and the house across the streets, that's been completely done, sold for $100,000 higher. So like, there's always a give and take. So just be aware of like, you're not going to find a perfect house. So just be aware of like things that will help improve the value, things will help improve the safety, just so you're not closing on the house and then a month later your AC goes out. You're like, Dan, you didn't tell me that the AC was that bad. You're like, oh, yeah.
That's great. No, I appreciate that approach. Do you have any book recommendations or podcasts that you're inclined to that have helped you along the way?
Yeah, I love Brian North got me into a book. Really, I wasn't a big reader in my early 30s, and as I've gotten older, I've really started to appreciate, just the value and advice that you get, the nuggets that you get from reading. Plus, it forces you to slow down a little bit, which is nice instead of being at a frantic pace all the time. So I love the Go Giver by I think it's Bob Berg.
Yep.
It's just a great way to reframe your way of thinking of just again constantly offering value. If I remember a friend of mine who's not a client, she just she was going through a rough time and work was challenging, and kids and COVID and that kind of stuff, and so I would just send out a book or flowers, just like, hey, just thinking about you, and just for like giving for nothing else but just giving. It's like, hey, I'm thinking about you, hope you're doing well. And so it reframes your mind. Like if you approach that habit, the universe will reward you in some sense. Don't do it because you're like, well, the universe is going to give me that. But just know that like once you adopt that attitude and that frame of mind, like you tend to be just a good source of energy and positivity for your sphere. Definitely love Sell It Like Sirhan, the Ryan Sirhan. I think that was his first book. Especially for like newer agents, I think that's a great. He's got a newer one called Big Money Energy. I haven't read that yet, but Sell It Like Sirhan. He talked about like his background, which is pretty fascinating. He had moved to New York to be an actor. Was in some soap operas. I think it was like The Young and Restless or something like that. But failed as an actor, and then got into real estate and was like literally in New York. And he's from Colorado. Like his parents own a ranch in Colorado. He's in New York with like cowboy boots on, a shirt, and one of those like pearl snap shirts. Awesome. Like clearly doesn't like fit into New York, and it just goes to show you that like it doesn't matter like where you're from. Like like he was able to succeed, in New York with that. And then oh geez, what else? I mean, I just started diving into extreme accountability, which is, I think it's Jocko Willink. Pronouncing that right? Yep. Willink, who is a former Marine and
Navy SEAL.
Just talks, and Navy SEAL. Thank you. He's talking about. I just dove into it just about the beginning part of the book, which I'm not really giving anything away. Was basically there. He was in this division, and chaos ensues, and then they realize that it was friendly fire. And luckily, no one was injured in this incident. And apparently, it happens quite a bit. I think it's called like Code Blue, or not Code Blue, something blue. His CO, his commanding officer, and all generals come in, and he knows. He's like, this is how basically you get dishonorably discharged. He's like, this is how you get let go because you weren't prepared.
Yep.
And he's putting down all the details, trying to figure it out, interviewing everyone, and all he can come back to is like, I was in charge, so this is my fault. This is my fault, And his commanding officers respected that. He's, obviously it's a important lesson to learn, especially when it's literally life and death. But it applies to everything in life, especially in the business world. If for some reason your assistant isn't succeeding or your inspector isn't succeeding, it you have to take accountability for that. Like,
Yep.
maybe the training needs to change. Maybe it just wasn't the right hire. Maybe you hired too quickly, or you rushed it in order to fill something and end up costing you more. Um, when you take full accountability for your life, for your actions, it really changes a lot of things.
Cool. It's a good book. You'll like
Yeah,
that one.
yeah.
Where can people find you?
On the gram, I'm at at Dan Weisinger, and that's Weiisinger, and it's Dan Weisinger on Facebook, Dan Weisinger on Instagram, and I believe it's Dan Weisinger on TikTok. But I don't have. I think I have 2 posts on TikTok, so more future content to come. But that's where they can find me.
This has been awesome. I really enjoyed learning a lot more about you and your strategies and your business. Thanks for taking
Yeah,
the time today.
thanks a lot for having me on, John.
Thank you for listening to Just Another Real Estate Podcast. For the latest episodes, please subscribe and be sure to follow Dwell Inspect Arizona on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. To contact Dwell Inspect Arizona, call us at 480-867-4599. If you'd like to be a guest on the podcast, email our team at office@dwellinspectaz.com.